The Galaxy Watch has been a great recommendation for years, until last year the OnePlus Watch 2 gave it some pretty stiff competition. I personally still preferred the Galaxy Watch as an everyday smartwatch, but now the OnePlus Watch 3 is here, and it absolutely destroys the Galaxy Watch in a couple really important categories. So there are several main upgrades to the OnePlus Watch 3 that fixed its biggest drawbacks last year and also strengthened its biggest benefits. So I've been wearing this for about 2.5 weeks now, and in that time, I only charged it twice. If this was a Galaxy Watch, I would have charged it 17 times. And there's finally a rotating crown here, which we didn't have in the past, and we also don't have on the Galaxy Watch Ultra or the Galaxy Watch 7. Of course, I did a ton of testing with this watch, so in this video, we'll talk about the design, dive into new features, and of course, go through some of those accuracy tests I talked about. This is not intended to be a comparison with the Galaxy Watch, but being that that was my previous favorite Android smartwatch, there's going to be some things that I mentioned that are comparing the two, but mainly this is going to be a review of the OnePlus Watch 3. And the full disclosure here, this video is not sponsored. OnePlus had no editorial privileges. They didn't get to preview this video, but they did send me a review unit a couple weeks early, so I was able to test this for the past 3 weeks to make this video prior to launch. As usual though, we'll be covering some big pros and a few surprising drawbacks. Well, we'll get to that. But let's start off with the design. This, of course, has a rotating crown. My personal favorite improvement on this watch on the top. Of course, it also works as a button, but rotating it just navigates the UI and makes it so much more usable for a smartwatch, so you're not always swiping. I just think that's so useful to have on a watch to kind of scroll faster. On the bottom, we have another button that's going to be great for opening workouts, or you can use it for an ECG. More on that a little bit later. This comes in 2 different colors, emerald titanium, which isn't really emerald at all. It's actually just silver titanium bezel, and the only green is going to be on the strap. Additionally, the only titanium is going to be on the bezel. It's really a stainless steel body, stainless steel buckle, like it's a stainless steel watch with a little bit of titanium on the front. So the titanium is really just for aesthetics, not making any significant difference in the weight or the durability of this. Stainless steel is still pretty great though. The other color is obsidian titanium. That's the one that I have that you'll be seeing throughout this video. It's just the same thing, but black. The strap on the back is a 22mm, very standard connection. It kind of has that little dovetail on the bottom though. So if you get a different strap, it won't look quite like this. You'll have a little gap there. But I kind of like the option to switch out to a very common strap connection. The display on the front, we have thinner bezels. Tell me if you heard that before, but 1.5-inch display now. And this is actually really nice. This is a great display. For a while, I felt like we were kind of stalled out with smartwatches that had that big black ring around them. This one doesn't have that. You've got some nice ticks on the outside. It's a 2D sapphire crystal glass. The peak brightness is 2200 nits, and it goes as low as 1 hertz, so you should have a pretty solid battery life, which we know is true, and I'll talk about that later. Durability on this, IP68 and 5 atmospheres, very standard for a smartwatch. This will work for swimming and things like that, but kind of surprising that the OnePlus phone, the 13, has IP69, and they didn't give it to the watch. You'd expect watches would have a higher durability rating like that. So I'm not sure why they did that, but it really shouldn't be an issue for most use cases. It's also MIL 810H spec'd, so it should be good for temperatures up to, I believe, 158 Fahrenheit. I wore this in a sauna that was a lot hotter than that, but being close to your skin, I didn't have a problem for about 20 minutes that I was in there. I think your skin cools down the watch enough that hopefully it doesn't get above 158, but that's something to keep in mind with this watch. As far as health monitoring goes, kind of getting into that realm there, we have some new improvements here and some testing I've done. It has multi-dimensional sleep monitoring. There's a wellness score on here coming soon. There's wrist temperature added. There's a 60-second health report, which I actually really like this. Garmin's been doing this for a while, and theirs is 2 minutes, but 60 seconds is pretty nice. You just sit there with your finger on the bottom button, and it'll track 6 different key indicators, really 5 that it tracks, and it also shows you your sleep score. It doesn't really measure your sleep score while you're awake, obviously, but it tells you your vascular age, tells you your heart rate, your blood oxygen, your mental wellness, so like your general stress level essentially, based on your HRV that is. It has, of course, sleep quality, it's going to tell you that, and your wrist temperature as well. And the ECG analyzer is not going to be available in the US ever. Like it's not coming to the US or Canada. I don't know if that means it got rejected by the FDA or they just didn't want to go through that process, but unfortunately, that's not going to show up here in the US. Other parts of the world, yeah, you'll get ECG on here. So after using that little 60-second checkup, one thing that I thought was interesting is that it does give you like kind of a conclusion at the end. I don't know if I trust a conclusion. It got mad at me and said like it was a kind of a warning that my heart rate was low. It was 49, which is not a problem. Like if you look it up, people who work out a lot, it's very normal to have a heart rate between like 40 and 60 as a resting heart rate. So 49, like I was happy with that. I felt fine. It wasn't an issue. But the watch was like really concerned about my heart rate, which I don't know, kind of shows like maybe the people that tested this didn't work out as much as you might expect. But they did have some other great things on here. Nap detection was awesome. I've never seen a watch that had nap detection as good as this one. If you fall asleep for 25 minutes, you wake up, sometimes you're like, how long was I asleep? Like the watch knows, and it tells you that it pops up, and it actually adds that to your total sleep score as well. So I really like that it does that. There's also an automatic night mode, kind of following through with the sleep detection here. It seems to be very good at detecting when you fall asleep, and when that happens, it can change the settings so that it's not going to be waking you up all night long. That's a setting you could enable if you wanted to do that. And when you wake up in the morning, it shows you the weather, and you can tap on the sleep score button, and it gives you the full analysis of your sleep. I really like that it has that. Garmin and Pixel watches both do something similar, and I think more watches should be copying that. As far as the sleep accuracy goes, the total duration, like I said, very, very good at detecting sleep when you first fall asleep. In fact, even better than Garmin, in my opinion, at detecting when you fall asleep. It's kind of impossible to compare the sleep stages that it gives you without having an EEG or the stickers on your head. I don't have that, so I can't really talk about that, but the blood oxygen detection on here was very accurate, very normal, compared with like my Whoop, my Ring, my Garmin. Everything else was giving me like approximately the same value, about 95 or 96 at night. This does not tell you your HRV, your heart rate variability, in the sleep analysis. I wish it did do that, but it does give you a snoring and noise monitoring option when your phone is around. So that's great for sleep disturbances or just kind of checking up on any possible respiratory problems you have when you're sleeping. They have wrist temperature, as I said. I think that's completely useless on watches. For sleep tracking, it would be very useful for something else that this doesn't have that I'll mention in a minute. But overall, I was quite impressed by the sleep tracking on this watch. It does a good job, like I said, of detecting when you fall asleep, and the morning brief is absolutely awesome. I love having that on here. But moving into fitness tracking. How does this do with fitness tracking? Well, the GPS, they claim to have better GPS precision with dual frequency now, L1 and L5. They have a new chip on here. I'll show that on screen, the new Broadcom chip. So faster satellite searching, lower power consumption because it's 7 nanometers versus 28 before. And we have 100 sport modes and 11 professional sport modes on here as well. But what does that actually mean? Well, the GPS analysis from my testing was pretty decent in open space. If you have a good view of the sky, it locks in very quickly within a couple seconds, and it does a good job. I have no complaints at all. But in a crowded environment, if you're in a city with tall buildings, anywhere that you don't have a great view of the sky, this does struggle. It's not perfect. And so, like, I walked around Philly a lot. I was there for the Super Bowl parade, and it kind of struggled when like you had buildings around you. It would kind of cut corners. It would squiggle through them a little bit. So if you're doing a lot of running in cities, I wouldn't expect the dual band GPS to save you here. The heart rate analysis. Again, this is an optical based heart rate sensor, much like basically every other smartwatch that I've ever tested. And I would say this is like mid to upper mid level on the accuracy. It's good for an everyday smartwatch. And as you can see on these charts right here, if you're doing like, I did a strength workout, I did some yoga, I did some stretching, a lot of different workouts that should be fairly easy. And for the most part, it was within maybe 1 or 2 beats per minute of a Polar H10 heart rate strap. That's an ECG strap. So that's kind of like the known accurate reference that I'm using. You can see that at the end, if you do something that boosts your heart rate very rapidly, this does tend to lag. And looking at a running workout, you could see exactly that. In the beginning, when you speed up, or anytime you do intervals for that matter, this will definitely lag and really struggle to keep up with any fast changes. But on a steady state run, it does a good job of mostly being within a couple beats per minute. Sometimes the furthest it veered off I would see is about 5 beats per minute on that steady state run. You'd see some little blips here and there, but for the most part, I think the heart rate sensor is reasonably accurate. I think somebody training for like a 5K or a casual thing like that would really like this. As far as other workouts go, besides running, like I said, I've been doing a lot of swimming lately, and there are some things I like and dislike about this in terms of swimming. So what I like, one, it detects what kind of stroke you're doing. So it'll just say like, hey, you swam 100 freestyle this time, you did another lap, you swam 200 freestyle or breaststroke or whatever. It can detect what your swim is. For longer continuous indoor swims, it was really dead on for distance tracking. So I swam 1,000 yards. Looked at this, it said 1,000 yards. That was great. But if you're doing anything like intervals, and I know Garmin kind of struggles with this as well, but there's a solution I'll talk about in a second that they implemented that this didn't. And that is like, if you're doing shorter intervals, I swam 1,700 yards, doing like 100, 200, different intervals like that. This one came up with 1,575. So you're up by 125 yards out of 1,700, which really throws off your pace and basically all the metrics. It's completely useless when you have that happen. So that kind of ties in my main complaint with workouts on this watch. The buttons don't do anything useful at all. So I mentioned that Garmin, if you do intervals and you don't pause it or you don't mark laps for rest period, it can also be a little bit off on pool swims, but you can literally use the button and pause it and do that very easily there. This, you can technically pause your workout, but you can't add laps, you can't use the buttons for basically anything. And if your hands are sweaty or if you're in the pool, like you just can't do that. But aside from that, that's very common for a lot of Wear OS watches and Galaxy watches and Apple watches as well. But the big strength of this watch, kind of getting into the battery life here. This is claimed to have 5 days or 120 hours in smart mode, which is really just full-blown smartwatch mode. It's not like any kind of limited mode. I think you could decrease this if you turn the brightness up, if you do, very, very long workouts, obviously, or even had an always-on display enabled. But if you don't have that, which I'm fine not having an always-on display, some people are not, but all things considered, 5 days of battery life is pretty consistent with what I was actually getting. If you go into power saving mode, you get 16 days of battery life, and the power saving mode is still quite usable. It's not like a time only mode. So when I got down to about 10%, it switches over to power saving mode. You're able to get another day or two out of it. And it does, it tracks your sleep. It does all the normal stuff. It's just not going to have raise to wake and other things that use a lot of power. And the way they're able to do this is with the dual engine architecture. It's using the very powerful Snapdragon W5 chip. I love to see that. It's very fast, very snappy using this watch. But when you're not doing anything very active, it's going to use the BES 2800, a much more efficient chip, much slower, much lighter, and they also have a much better battery on this, much like we see on the OnePlus 13. This has the same silicon nanostack battery, so it's 631 milliamp hours in a much more compact size compared to the old one, which was 500 last year. So that alone is going to destroy most other everyday watches. Instead of charging every single night, so you can't really do any kind of sleep tracking or charging throughout the day randomly, this one is going to last 5 days. Like I said, you're looking at 18 hours on the Apple Watch, 24 hours on the Pixel Watch. Galaxy Watch 7's about 20 to 24 hours. This just leaves them in the dust. And with that being said, the Pixel Watch, the Galaxy Watch, and the OnePlus Watch are 3 of the most common Android watches here in the US. So I'll be making an in-depth comparison video very, very soon. Get subscribed and leave a comment down below letting me know what specifically you want to see in that video. As far as charging goes, I kind of like that it has a USB Type-C charger. You don't plug USB-C into the watch, but you have a little puck that you can put on the back, and then you can plug in just when you're traveling, less cables you have to bring. But the downside is that this doesn't have any kind of wireless charging. No Qi wireless charging, no charging on the back of your phone. You have to have that little charger. Now, taking a look at the user interface here, very familiar, Wear OS 5. You can tap and hold on the watch face and change between a bunch of different watch faces. There are also photo and video watch faces we can get on here, so kind of nice that they're moving. Swiping down, you have your quick access settings here, and there are a lot. Honestly, you kind of have to look at them and really think about it to figure out what some of them are, but it's nice that you have so many settings up there and you can customize that. Swiping up from the bottom, or like I said, just using the crown, you get your notifications, and then swiping left or right, you go through these tiles, and with any tile, you can tap into it and then use the crown to rotate. It would be nice if you could just rotate down and get right into it, but it's nice. You can see your sleep score, you can see the weather, you can see your heart rate and your stress and whatever you want like that. They also did add some other cool new features on here. Cool new features, maybe gimmicky, depends on who you are. One of them is the ability to control vertical videos on your phone. So maybe if your phone's plugged in somewhere, you can just use the watch to swipe through YouTube Shorts or TikTok, for example. Of course, we have camera control on here, SOS, Find My Device, and all the Google things you'd expect. Google Wallet for tap to pay, Google Maps, Calendar, all the Google apps you would expect. They also have offline Spotify, which I use a lot when I'm running. And as far as the Google Assistant goes, it's very, very fast. Interestingly, it doesn't seem to be rebranded as Gemini yet. So this is still Google Assistant on here, at least right now. So the UI on the watch, 2 thumbs up. Getting into the app then, you control this on your phone using just one app, which I appreciate, instead of having a bunch of other apps. Wear OS has kind of been improving on that front. It's very simple, it's nice that it shows you everything kind of in a Garmin-esque way where you can see, a lot of stuff about your workouts and your ECG and your heart rate and different things like that. On the bottom, you can go over to health. They give you some insights here. They give you your health journey, showing you like the different workouts and your sleep. I kind of really like a lot of that stuff. You can then go over to fitness and you see all your workouts right here. You can see all of them. You can also go, run, walk, and see them individually. That part of the interface I actually really like quite a bit. And if you go over to devices, you can actually go and kind of change the settings right here. There's not a ton that you can really change from your phone. Without really digging into it. And kind of my only complaint besides that with this is if you go into, let's say like this workout, for example, there's not a whole lot you can really dig that deep into on this. So you could tap into tiles and change the tiles you have and kind of rearrange them. You could enable parental controls if this is for your kid, which I wouldn't get for your kid because it's a very large watch. But you can also go over to, like I said, if we go back to fitness, you can tap into any one of these workouts. So like this run, they do give you a decent amount of metrics here. You can't dig quite as deep as I would like, but I have to say, like, it does give you quite a few things that I really like. It gives you your running form. You have some advanced assessments right here. So your pace, your energy recovery time, like how long it thinks you should wait until doing this again. And you can really kind of dig into some of them. A lot of these kind of have a limit of how far you can dig into them. So aerobic efficiency, if you tap on this, it just tells you like what normal levels are. So this kind of feels like a big nothing page here. But again, for what it is, it's kind of giving you a decent amount of information. Getting into a speaker and a microphone test, you can answer phone calls on this. It's not particularly loud, but it does have Bluetooth 5.2, so you can answer phone calls and stuff like that. So this is a voice recording using the OnePlus Watch 3. I'm holding it about 12 inches away from my face, so this is probably what I would do on a phone call. It would sound something like this. We are currently indoors, but let me know how this sounds. What's the weather in San Juan?
Currently in San Juan, Puerto Rico, it's 84 degrees and partly cloudy. Today, it'll be partly cloudy with a forecasted high of 85 and a low of 70.
Now, let's talk about the pros and the cons of this watch. The pros. I really like the design of it. I think the very thin bezel with the ticks on the outside looks really good. The battery life is absolutely incredible for a Google-based watch like this. The rotating crown makes the watch so much more usable, and there's plenty of apps available. You can get like the video watch faces, customized tiles, there's fall detection on here, LTE. Overall, a fantastic Wear OS watch for an everyday Android watch. But not everything is perfect. There are some drawbacks here. For one, this is available in only one size. There's also no female cycle tracking. There's no ECG in the USA. There's no body scan, which I don't really use a lot, but it's nice that like, hey, Samsung does have that. And there's no mention of things like Aqua Touch or glove mode, which we did have on the OnePlus 13. Maybe that's somewhere deep in settings and I didn't find it, but at least, I haven't seen it yet. But really the huge miss here, in my opinion, is that it seems like OnePlus is really clearly didn't think about women at all when they made this watch. Like they only made it in one fairly large size, and they didn't add, despite having a temperature sensor, they didn't add female cycle tracking out here, among a couple other things that make it seem like this is really geared for one audience. Also, it's no surprise here, but I know people will be commenting on this, asking, does this work with iPhone? It's a Wear OS watch, so unfortunately, no, iPhones and Wear OS are not compatible. And then, of course, the price on this, $329, like I said, available in 2 colorways, and it is available for pre-sale at the time of this video. So I will have an affiliate link down below if you guys want to order it and pre-sale through there. I think it delivers on February 25th is the actual sale date when it comes out, but my thoughts overall on this watch. There are a lot of reasons to get a smartwatch. If you are a woman and you want to do something like you want cycle tracking, or perhaps you're somebody with just a smaller wrist in general, there are better smartwatches out there, better alternatives for you. If you are primarily focused on tracking workouts, there are better alternatives out there. But if you just want an everyday watch, it's going to be great for tracking like a 5K you might be training for. Maybe you want something to answer phone calls, get notifications. This is my new favorite, I would say, for an everyday Android smartwatch. I love the rotating crown. I love the UI. I think the superior battery life makes a massive, massive difference. So you don't have that charging anxiety at like 5 p.m. every day. Just going multiple days makes a big difference here. So this watch definitely brings some really stiff competition to the Galaxy Watch 7, the Pixel Watch, the Galaxy Watch Ultra, and honestly, even the Apple Watch as well. So if you haven't already, get subscribed so you see that comparison, and let me know what you think about this watch. A lot to like, but a couple things to dislike.